So,
Got it.
namaste, everyone. My name is Ramananda. I'll just introduce Nischala Devi briefly. I think many of you are here because you know her, but maybe not everyone knows her as well as I do. She was a mentor to me back in the late 70s when I moved to Connecticut Ashram. Remember, Nischala?
I do. I do.
And since that time, she's become a well-traveled, world-renowned teacher, healer, author. Her books have been translated into many languages. She's known for her innovative way of expressing yoga and its uses for spiritual growth and healing. And we're here today to celebrate one of her 3 or 4 books. I forget how many. 5. Okay. The revised version of The Secret Power of Yoga. As many of you may know, she has a unique way of understanding and articulating the teachings of yoga that really engage the heart, a more intuitive way or more female-oriented way of understanding the teachings of yoga and expressing them. So many of us have, for years, found her to be a great guide on the spiritual path. I'm just grateful that Nischala agreed to meet with us this way and talk a little bit about the way that she articulated Patanjali's words in a way that can really touch us and open our eyes to its meaning for us. So, Nischala, say anything more you want about who you are and how you got started with this book.
Who I am. Okay. Thank you so much, Ramanandaji. You know, those times in Connecticut where we were on fire are something that I draw from. To me, it's there's something about the beginning of a spiritual path. It's a little bit like the beginning of a love affair. You know, in the beginning of a love affair, everything is wonderful about that person. You're so excited to see them. You don't care what they look like, what their hair looks like, what anything looks like. All you care about is how much you love them. And I think it's really like that about from the spiritual way also, that fire has to keep continuously being stoked. And I think that's one of the reasons I've written a new version of the book. What I realized is that people who have started the path a long time ago and have been continuously treading on it, very often are not moving forward. They're not going ahead. They're doing the same thing every day, et cetera, but there's no real spiritual movement in that way because that fire has gone, and we have to reignite that fire in some way, constantly being able to understand what it is. So just a couple of things. In this book, I've also written a new preface because this was written in 2007 or published in 2007. So it was written earlier. And yoga was very different then. Not that many people knew of the sutras. We finally got it into the teachers' trainings. So people were forced to read the sutras or to understand, but most of it was very sketchy. They may have had one day of it or a couple of hours of it and nothing else. So when I wrote this book, it was very new to people, the Yoga Sutras. It wasn't something that they had embraced fully because of the lack of availability of it. For instance, when I first started with the Yoga Sutras, there were basically two books available that you could read. One was How to Know God, which became my Bible at the time. And the other was Swami Vivekananda, who wrote a version of what he called at the time Raja Yoga. And that was basically it. There was nothing else available. So a lot of what we did in those days to teach is you had to reach into your own soul, into your own spirit, and try to figure out what this was about. What were they trying to say? Because some of the language was very archaic, because these were people who lived in a time where in India, their language was very archaic compared to modern English. So it was something that we had to really comb through. And I guess I kept that same flavor, because as I taught, I had to make up things as I went along. I had to figure out an hour before, 2 hours before, what did this really mean? And what did it mean to us today? So one of the things I said in the beginning is observing how yoga has changed the world. And I think we can all agree on that. Yoga has really changed the world. It has taken off, especially the Western world. It has really taken off. And most of it is physical. So observing how yoga has changed the world, I cannot help but wonder how the world has changed yoga. So what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is most places, most studios do not embrace the wisdom teachings. They don't do it for a couple of reasons. They don't do it because it doesn't bring large groups. They don't bring it because they don't think the students are ready for it. And I think that that's something that we have to relook at. We have to see that there are people ready. If there's 20 million people practicing yoga, perhaps there's only 100,000 that are ready to go on, but that's still a large number. Why are we not teaching to these people? This became my frustration. I saw people who have been practicing the teachings for 30, 40, even 50 years. And I asked them, how has your practice changed over that time? And they look at me and they said, it hasn't. It's the same. I'm doing the same practice I did for all these years. And then I have to ask the next question. Are you the same as when you started? And if you have evolved, why has your practice not evolved? So this is really the reason for bringing in the third and fourth pada, to have this ability to move forward in our spirituality, not to just rest on our laurels and something that has been there for before. Move forward, bring that boldness that was originally there back into your life. Otherwise, it just becomes like something else. It becomes like routine, like brushing your teeth in the morning. You get up, you brush them, you go on with the day. Nobody says to you, how was your toothbrushing this morning? Was it really good? Did you have fun with it? Nobody says that, right? Because not much has evolved. But when you sit down on your pillow, your chair, your mat, whatever you sit on, there has to be a fire within you lit. Otherwise, it will just be the same. Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti. I remember it was funny, I was teaching at this, at a center, and one of the chants was in English, I am bliss, I am bliss, I am bliss. And the person leading the chant was leading it like this. I am bliss, 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 I am. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, are you really? Because it really doesn't sound like it. If you're in bliss, sound like it. So this is really, to me, a book about getting that revival back, getting that fierceness, that that fire back in you to practice, because otherwise you'll just keep on Om Shanti, Om Shanti, Om Shanti, not even thinking about it. We do it mindlessly. So this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. Any questions come up, just pop up your hand or pop up the little yellow thing, whichever you like. So why I wrote it in the first place is I felt that, again, by the time I wrote it, there were many, many translations of the sutras. Yet they were so similar to each other. All of them, they seem to almost go to the same translator and use the same translation. And everything pointed to the mind, not to the heart. And it bothered me because I think that mental process will only get us so far. As I talk about it, it can bring us to the doorstep of liberation, but to get through that door, you have to use the heart. The mind cannot take us there. So starting to look through this and realizing that at that time, 99.9% of all the translations were done by men. They were all done by men. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but they have a very different perspective than I do. Matter of fact, I was giving a talk the other day, an interview about the book, and the interviewer, who I've been with many times, and I really like, he said, "You know what people are saying about your translation?" I said, "No, what are they saying about my translation?" And he said, "That you're so far out there." I said, "Well, that's nothing new. I've always been far out there. But what's them to say that theirs is right and mine is wrong?" So I just want you to think for just a moment about all the different ways to worship in the world, all the different religions, and there's lots of them now. But even if you take one religion with one particular major deity, even then, everybody sees it in a particular different way. I particularly love Hinduism because there's about 350 million deities in Hinduism. And as I was driving to a temple with a friend in India, and I asked him, "Who's the presiding deity in this temple?" And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You know, I really don't know. All I know is if you don't like it, make it up, because there's always another deity popping up somewhere." And I think that that's the way the sutras need to be. There's a reason why Sri Patanjali never did a commentary on them. He did it so we could each interpret it according to our own hearts and not go into someone else's translation. So feel it, take it into your heart, and if it feels right, continue. Questions at this point? Okay. How many of you are students of the sutras? Let me see. Raise your hand. If you can, something you use on a regular basis. Oh, good. Okay. All right. Very good. So I think the importance of an ancient scripture is to keep it relevant. This is how I see it. And the relevance that we begin to accept is changing some things, especially the way they're described, parables, examples, etc. We can't bring them from another generation necessarily into this one. Few of them translate, a few of them don't. But what we have to do then is create new parables, new examples to let people know that this is relevant now, not then, but now. So the juxtaposition between turning on the evening news and picking up this book are great. One gives us hope, and one shows us the reality of what happens when humans do not follow their spiritual essence, but instead follow the path of greed and hatred. And we're warned about this in Hindu wisdom. And it's called the four yugas. And some of you know these, and I've talked about them before. And if you have read the former version, it's in there also. And this is a time period of 24,000 years. And what's so significant about it is that the main time period where it's thought to begin and continue to evolve is called as the Sat Yuga. When we read scriptures, when we practice spiritual practices, what we are doing is we're moving into Sat Yuga consciousness. Now, what does that mean? Sat Yuga was the time period where everyone knew who they were. They knew that they were divine beings. And if you know that you're a divine being, what happens? You automatically know that everybody else is a divine being. So you can't treat people poorly because they're you, right? You can't treat them like that. So this is the Sat Yuga, and then the consciousness slowly disintegrated until we got to where we are now, which is called the Kali Yuga. And those of you who know the deity goddess Kali know it's a time of destruction, but also more than that, transformation. So we see that yoga has become really popular now. Buddhism has become very popular. All these practices that draw us inward. And even the major religions have gone more toward that inner side or making more retreats, etc., because we realize we're not getting it from the outside world. We have to go within to get it. It's impossible to get it any other way. So the idea is those of us that are practicing, those of us that are evolving into spirit, have to hold that wisdom because it has been lost in the Kali Yuga. And if you don't believe me, turn on the 6 o'clock news. It's all there. This, however, this wisdom brings us higher. So, books 1 and 2. So the Yoga Sutras are divided into 4 padas. They're called padas or books. Pada has a few different meanings. Pada can mean foot. You hear sometimes pada puja. They do a pada puja to someone's feet. It also means way or path. So there's 4 ways that are described, and there's 4 different padas. The first pada is called Samadhi pada. And in Samadhi pada, we have this idea and this concept of who we are. It speaks very closely to who we are as a divine self. It reminds me, who am I? Right in the beginning. This is who you are. And the entire rest of the sutras are just to get to that place of who we are. We are a divine being, period. That's it. We are also human. So we share the divinity and the humanity together. Sadhana pada is the next pada, and it's the cultivation of spiritual practice. So this is the pada that has all the practices in it. From asana to japa to deep relaxation, everything's in there. That's this one on spiritual practice. So this is the one that most people focus on. This also has the Ashtanga yoga in it, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And it's something that people are comfortable with. Most people know the terms ahimsa or satya. They're comfortable with that. So people choose what they're comfortable with, but yet they're missing the whole rest of the explanation. And at that point, after sadhana pada, we move into something that's foreign to most people. And that is called as vibhuti pada. And Vibhuti means the divine manifestation of power. So this is where we begin to see the fruits along the way. This is where we begin to see the benefit of it. It's like anything else. So for instance, if you started practicing or learning how to play the piano, say in 2005, all right, so now we're what, 10, 17 years later. You don't play the piano the same way you played it in 2005. Hopefully, you've learned something. And now you're starting to see the ease with which you can play other pieces that were so difficult then. It's the same way with spiritual practice. The things that seemed difficult before may be now a little bit easier, etc. So, and then finally we have Kavalya Pada, which means supreme liberation. Of all of them, it's probably the most esoteric and the most intricate to be able to explain. One of the things that I did want to share with you is the process of doing something like this. So initially, I was inspired to do the first edition because there was nothing else for me that appealed to me. And when I would teach sutra classes, I would give my own interpretation. And at that time, people said, why don't you just write this down and write a book? I said, oh no, I'm not ready to write a book. I didn't want to do something like that, because writing a book is very specific. It's in print and it can't be changed. As a matter of fact, in the publishing business, they'll say to you, okay, you can make changes now. And then the next one, they say you can make very small changes. And then finally they say, no changes, finish. So as you evolve in your thinking, I remember Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was quoted on this, and they brought out her book and they say 7 stages of grief. And she said, who said that? And they said, you did. They showed her the book. And she said, I said that a long time ago. My thinking has changed. So there's good and bad about writing a book in that way. But I was encouraged and I wrote the book, and it was so well received, mostly by women, but some men also embraced it, that it was very encouraging to see that people were now reading and studying the sutras. The revised edition was a little bit different. It was almost the opposite, in that a male scholar, Sanskrit scholar, had called me asking me to put my sutras in a particular website. And as I started talking to him, I realized that we needed a complete volume. It shouldn't, why are we hiding these 2 padas from people? Why are we not showing people these 2 padas? I just was, before the class today, I was just looking through some of my versions. There's no commentary on most of it. Why? What are we afraid of? Why can't we talk about things like cities? If we are mature spiritual seekers, let's talk about these things that you will experience if you haven't already experienced them. So let's talk about that. First, I just wanted to remind everyone, just for a moment, what this is all about. The following sutras enlighten us as to who we really are and to how we experience life when we are in the state of knowing. That's a lot. But how many of us on a daily basis remember who we are? Very few, very few. Especially if you work in something that is not blatantly spiritual. We forget. We start to think that we're something other than. We have to remember we're both, living simultaneously in the same space, the spirit and the human. They also remind us that as our consciousness moves outward, we separate from our essential nature. It is in this identification with our divine self that leads us to joy. And the very first sutra in this chapter, I think all of you know that very well. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the uniting of consciousness in the heart. This is not about control. If it was about control, there's some people that are very disciplined and very controlled, and they would be the ones that realize, and it's not that at all. It's those with an open heart that realize. And what I found as I moved into the third and fourth book, we suddenly came up with a word that we hadn't seen before. And that word is Hridaya. And it is mentioned numerous times. And Hridaya is the spiritual heart. That's what it is. So remember that we are being given the secret, but we are not given the key to unlock the secret until we get to the sutras in the third and fourth pada. Okay? So Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Chitta does not mean mind. Chitta means consciousness that resides in the heart. Okay? So something very strange happens. We're going through Sadhanapada, and we're going through our lovely Ashtanga yoga. And what happens? What happens at that point? We see it goes through yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara. It abruptly stops. The pada ends. What happened? What happened to dharana, dhyana, and samadhi? It was described. It was talked about in sutra in pada 2. But what happened to it? It's suddenly we find it in pada 3. Pada 3. What was pada 3 again? The divine manifestation of power? What would that have to do with meditation? So what we are immediately shown here, meditation is not a practice. We have things that help us. We have repetition of a mantra. We have observing the breath. We have deep relaxation. We have all these things that prepare us for meditation. But the meditation itself has nothing to do with doing. We are now moving in a realm of being. Does that make sense? Yeah. And this is why people struggle with meditation. They think it's something that you do. It's a little bit like sleep. So comes the time of the night, whatever time that is for all of you, and you get into your sleep clothes and you maybe put on a little candlelight, do a little pranayama, something like that, and then you lay down and hope for the best, right? There's nothing you can do to make yourself sleep. You just have to prepare everything and get yourself calm enough, close your eyes, lie there, and wait. Meditation's the same way. We get all prepared. We do alternate nostril breathing. We do some stretching. We do some different practices. And then we sit and be still. And that's what they're talking. And that's why the sutras are now in the third book. For that reason, the third pada. So if you were ever wondering, I always wondered, why is it not? They talk about it in a second, but why don't they describe it? It's not a practice. It's a gift. It's something that you sit there and next thing you know, you don't know anything. Nothing is there. That's meditation. Questions? Nothing came up yet? Okay. So let's tackle this elephant in the room, the cities. Okay? Why are we so afraid of something that's natural? Why are we constantly warned not to pay any attention to the cities? Can you tell me? I have no idea, but I can guess. So, both Vibhuti and Kavalyapata describe the psychic and spiritual powers, the cities, as fruits gained through spiritual practice. Although the attainment of these powers can be a way of evaluating spiritual progress. So that's the reason that we explain them. We want to be able to see, where are we? How am I doing? There's no way to see it, but the cities show us. So although the attainment of these powers can be a way of evaluating spiritual progress, we are well and strongly advised not to dwell on them as they distract us from the ultimate realization of the divine self. Right? Is that true so far? Yeah. The irony is that Vibhuti-pada has the greatest number of sutras of all the other padas. So somebody wanted us to know about this, right? Also, the explanation of the cities continues into book 4. It is a bit like describing the tasty treats in the cookie jar to a 6-year-old while expounding upon the unhealthy effects of sugar, white flour, and butter. It would be as difficult to convince the yoga student not to hope for the powers it would be to keep those little fingers out of the cookie jar. Right? We need something, some kind of reward, something to know, is this right? So, what are these cities? One of the things that happens is we begin, 2 things happen as we move into books 2 and 3 and 4. You begin to, first of all, understand that this path that you began to tread on is much vaster than you could ever imagine. It's so big. And once you take that step and start, you have no idea where it's going to lead. We've got hints of it, but not much. The other thing that happens, we start to see a polarity that we didn't see before, and we have to reconcile that. So here we begin to get into a little bit of the Purusha and the Pukriti. So what that means is we have these 2 forces described as spirit and nature, which is okay. The problem with it is they put a gender on it, someone, whoever they was. They didn't understand that these are not gender related, but they put the word Purusha as the masculine, and Prakriti then became, by default, the feminine, the nature. Therefore, the masculine job is to control the feminine. Well, that's not right. Think of it instead, and I wish they had asked me at the time, as a scientist, when you talk about 2 forces opposing each other, they're not masculine or feminine. One is centrifugal, one is centripetal. One pulls one way, one pulls the other way. They're equal and opposite forces. And this is what I tried to get across in the book also. Stop thinking of these things as masculine, feminine. You're doing yourself a disservice, whether you're masculine or feminine. And this is how the major religions have done this for thousands of years. And this is where all the prejudices come from. The Prakriti is less than the Purusha and therefore needs to be controlled. And women are feminine, they need to be controlled. We have to get out of this if we're spiritual beings. We cannot think like this. It has to be moved on. Okay? The other thing that it does, if any of you have the book, you can follow along, 335. So we have a concept here called Samyama. And what Samyama is, simply put, because of the timing, it's when you move smoothly between dharana, contemplation, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi. When those three meld together, it's called a samyama, and there's a tremendous amount of power in that as it comes. And this is what we keep hearing about the sutras. We keep hearing that they're so powerful. Yet, I think few experience it because they don't get into the deeper sutras in this way. So here we have, by samyama on the spiritual heart, here we come into the word hridaya again, hridaya. By samyama on the spiritual heart, hridaya, the intent and contents of the chitta are revealed. So here we're getting a little bit of a secret, and it's saying if you go in through the heart, that's where the knowledge is. It doesn't say to think it. It says to go in through the heart, because what we're talking about when we talk about the third and fourth pada, we're talking about these extraordinary senses. We're talking about what I call the clairs, the clairvoyant, the clairsentient, the clairvoyant, and the intuition that begins to come from hridaya is part of that also. So we start to know things that we never knew before. Now, my feeling is that if someone has been practicing for a long time, you are already experiencing these things. All this will do was confirm to you what it is. I'm sure most of us feel things. Some of us feel maybe a little bit too much, a little too sensitive, but that's the basis of the spiritual practice. You don't practice for years and years without getting sensitive. That's how it happens. Okay? Does that make sense? So think more when you think of heart, use the Sanskrit hridaya. When you say hridaya, it takes you to a place further than your imagination can go. It's that spiritual essence. What I hope is to allow people to recognize what they already have. So one of my questions is, do you ever think of someone and then your phone rings 5 minutes later and it's them? Do you ever do that with an email or whatever? So I'm seeing head shake. That is a city. That is a city. You have that city. It's not scary, is it? You just know. So what I want to encourage you is start to look for these things in your life. Do you hear things before they happen? Do you see things before they happen? Do you feel things before they happen? I don't know why, but I just don't want to go there. I don't know what it is. And trust yourself that that's not the right place to go. All these are considered gifts along the way. Now, we are discouraged from getting into them too much, like a circus act. But you know, most sincere seekers, I don't feel, has that problem. And it takes a lot to get to that place. It's not something that comes easy. So most people don't have the tenacity to do the practices for 50 years to just get a few cities. So with their gifts and say, oh, that's nice. Come on, let's walk together on the path. You don't control me, but I'm going to use you when I want to. Who knows? You may want to use something. We described the 8 major cities. And one very interesting. So what I do with this, and we'll see how it goes. But what I did is I took the cities and I put them down a few notches to see how we experience them in everyday life. For instance, one of the cities, to become very light is one of the cities. Well, to me, a seasoned ballet dancer has this city, right? I mean, when you watch them leap across the stage, they look like they're flying. Or when they pick up these, they have to be at least 100 pounds, like they weigh nothing and lift them over their head. There's something in there, a way to make yourself light that they know about. So this is something that we see even in our daily life. There was a very interesting situation that I had a few years ago. I was team teaching with another, I was a Swami at the time with another Swami. And he had the ability to come into a room and nobody knew he was there until he was ready for them to know he was there. And we always laughed because I had the opposite. As soon as I walked into the building, people could feel my presence. So we had these two that we never talked about them as cities, but we had these two qualities that we would joke about and laugh about. He had the invisibility and I had the omnipresence. So all these things are in our lives already. Recognize them. The other thing that I just wanted to share with you is how things change from one pada to another. Because what is explained in the portion on practice is then something that you have embodied and now can share with others. So I'd like to give you one example if I could. Would you like that? Yeah, okay, just a little nod every once in a while. It's very funny. I've never done a book talk on Zoom before. They've always been lives, although sometimes the people there were almost zoomed out. But anyway, let's go back to 133. 133, very popular sutra. Everybody loves this sutra. They nicknamed it the 4 locks and the 4 keys because everyone loves it. And in it, it says, so they're giving us ways to preserve our calmness and peace of mind. And it says to preserve openness of heart and calmness of mind, nurture these attitudes. And the first one is kindness to those who are happy. Okay? So it's a way of being kind. And it says here, this is a large dose of practical advice that allows us to integrate the highest spiritual values with our everyday lives. Isn't that what it's about, really? Most of us are probably not going to go live in caves. We're going to integrate with the world. Why not show the world the spiritual aspect? So this kindness is talked about here as a practice. And then what happens? We see it again, this time in the 3rd pada, 324, where it talks about having samyama. Oops, on kindness, sorry. Samyama on kindness. By samyama on kindness and other virtuous qualities, one develops the power to transmit these qualities to others. This is the difference between the padas. Once you move into what I named it section 2, and I call it part 2, from devoted practice to higher consciousness. Okay? Because that's what happened. You're practicing, I'm practicing being kind, I'm practicing being kind. And after a while, you're not practicing it anymore. You just are kind. That's it. And this is what they're talking about here. One develops the power to transmit the qualities to others. When the idea of kindness was first introduced in Sutra 133, the concept offered an evolutionary practice toward oneness. On first glance, the quality of kindness may not seem like a high spiritual value. Yet, as we evaluate our encounters and relationships, this quality is often retracted or hidden. To be fully present with an open heart to another in this age of quick encounters, it is not only a virtue, but a true gift. Book 3 transforms this precious concept from an aspiring practice into a state of being that has the power to transmit these exalted qualities to others. Just reading that by heart, because, whenever I think of the word kindness, I have to think of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I had the great honor of meeting him, close encounter a few years ago in Delhi. And one of the things he always says, I'm not a Buddhist. My religion is kindness. And I just look at the world today and I thought, boy, couldn't we use a dose of this? So I have a little story that I put in here that I'd like to read to you, because I think it proves that, it shows what we're talking about. But first, let me just finish this. When we allow our spiritual nature to direct our lives, kindness and compassion are elevated. It is important when choosing a focus for meditation that it elevates your mental and emotional states, as well as reflects who you want to become. Choosing kindness and compassion allows us to express these qualities and invites them to be shared with many. In that way, peace rests in our hearts. A person burgeoning with kindness is welcomed everywhere. There is an immediate transformational quality they radiate in every person and every situation that they encounter. The New York subway is not necessarily the place we think of to develop kindness, or any virtuous quality for that matter. Yet for one evening rider, it did just that. It was the same train route that Inga took at the end of a long workday. She was eager to arrive home, take off her shoes, put up her feet, and relax. Her body could almost feel the anticipated relaxation when a very curious little girl nestled up to her, needing some distraction from what appeared to her to be an arduous journey. Inga responded with kindness. Are you ready to go home and put on your pajamas and go to bed? It might have been a projection on Inga's part, but it started a dialogue. What are pajamas? A bit startled by the response, Inga replied, pajamas are what you sleep in. A curious look appeared on the small face. Don't you know what pajamas are? What do you sleep in? I sleep in underwear that I wore that day. The statement prompted Inga to look more closely at the child. The tattered clothes revealed the reason pajamas were unknown. The girl's clothes had rips and tears and ground in smudges from top to toe. Looking toward the mother, Inga detected a sense of embarrassment at the condition of her child's appearance. A bit hesitant, Inga compassionately asked if she could send a gift of pajamas to the young girl from the store where she was employed. With some reluctance, the mother wrote down the address where they would receive the gift. The next day, while she was preparing to send the package, an idea occurred to Inga. If there was one child in need, there must be more. Her mission had begun. First, she approached her employer for donations of children's sleepwear. Carrying the bundles to her apartment, she made a mental note of other nearby stores she could solicit. The stops proved fruitful, and soon her home was filled with bags of small-sized PJs. She began to recruit her friends and neighbors to distribute the night clothes to homeless shelters, schools, daycare centers, anywhere there was a need. Inga was pleased with the enthusiasm of the recruits as they gladly distributed the clothing to delighted recipients. The local merchants learned of her efforts, and before long, a warehouse was needed for all the donated items, which now included clothing for daytime, outerwear, and shoes. The hearts of the volunteers held images of the beaming faces of the children who dressed each night in their new clothes, ready for bed. One person's kindness to a small child evoked a deep compassion that inspired others to give. It is difficult to know who benefited more, the children in their new wardrobe or those who understood the joy of kindness through newfound compassion. Don't think that by going into the third and fourth pada, you're leaving the world. You're making it a better place. As you elevate your consciousness, the world's consciousness goes up. It's our job at this point, because others are fighting and hating each other. It's up to us. And the more powerful spiritually you gain, the more you're able to do in the world. Look at this, a simple ride on the subway. Couldn't we do something like that? There's certainly enough people in need. But this is what spiritual greatness does for us. It doesn't keep us bound to our meditation rooms or our pillows or a cave or a forest. It spreads our wings so we can fly and help in the rest of the world. And don't forget each morning, after your practice, to send those wishes of peace to the world. If any time in history, it needs it now. Ramananda, could you lead us in some ohms?
Only first after thanking you for that story. I'm tearing up here.
Tearing up too, and I wrote it. Yeah.
And I think I can speak for others that I just so much appreciate that last point that you made so powerfully, that the third and fourth padas don't take us away into some distant place in the head, but they open the heart even wider.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we see if there are any questions? I know we're sort of at the end of our time.
I think people are kind of Yes, let's see.
Anyone have a question?
Also, I just wanted to let people know, those of you that are not particularly readers, I'm adding to the audiobook, which will be available also. It's a bridge, it's not the whole thing, but it's helpful, especially if you're driving or going around town, etc. So that will be out probably in a month or so, or 2 months maybe, yeah.
Nirmala, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Nischala
Hi.
Devi. Blessings from Toronto. And thank you so much for this incredible event. I just want to show you my original copy with
Okay.
all my,
Okay.
and I have an inscription that you kindly sent to me. I've been teaching your book, from your book, since 2007 in
Wow.
at least 24 or more yoga teacher trainings. And it's been a blessing and continues to be a blessing. So I am over the moon thrilled with your new one.
Thank
And
you.
for me, it comes at the most delicious, auspicious timing. So I'm very grateful for this. And yeah, this is beautiful. I feel so full. And yes, I feel the fire sparked in me to dive in like again and more. And I really, really resonate with what you were saying about let's break away from this idea of Purush being masculine and Prakriti feminine. I'm writing a little chapter for a manual on Samkhya philosophy, and it struck me, it just like bothered me. It reminds me of Eve and temptation and the snake, and like how feminine is you know, lesser and troublesome. I thought I can't see it that way anymore. So something was shifting in me, and the way you speak to it, it just feels like it's really opening up, and I can't wait to dive into all of the wisdom that you've put together about the third and the fourth books. I haven't personally done a lot of study in them, so this is great. I just want to thank you so much. And it's so beautiful to, you know, even over Zoom, it's so
Good.
special to connect. And with this satsang people, I know Deborah, I want to say hi to her, and also new beautiful hearts and souls. So I'm just overflowing with gratitude and feeling the spark rekindled.
Great. I'm so happy. I'm happy to see you. Haven't seen you in a long time. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's like old home week here. It's wonderful.
It
Should do
is.
this more often. I should write a book more often.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you that may be interested, we're going to start some kind of a sutra series that will probably start in the fall. So if you're interested, stay connected with us, and we'll see what we can do. Because I think that I think it got lost. The sutras kind of get lost in the trainings and lost in the, and once people are done with it, they put it back on the shelf and they forget. So I think it's time to rekindle that, because like I said before, if there's any time we needed it, it's now. We really need to remember not only our spiritual self, we need to remember everybody else is also a spiritual being, because that is really not being thought about these days. So thank you. Yeah, it's great. Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you all for coming and being here. And now this is the part where you'd bring your book up to me and I'd sign it. But
Yeah.
I haven't figured out a way to do that on Zoom. I'm working on it, but I haven't found it yet. But when you get it, just next time I see you, I'll put a little thing in it, and just take it slow. Don't be intimidated by any of it. Just remember, I sat here for days, sometimes with one sutra, trying to figure out what it meant. What did it mean now to us in this time? How do you feel that? So just be patient with it. No one's going to come and take the book away from you. It's going to be here for a long time. And you can just keep reading it, and then hopefully we'll be able to get together and talk about it. That would be fun. Yeah. So if you're interested, let us know. Okay. If there's no other questions, so I assume then, I'm sorry to go into a commercial thing. It's available in Canada? Okay. Yeah. Because they're trying to get it Australia and England, and I just didn't know if Canada, I think Canada is kind of automatic, but what? Yes. Purusha.
I was able to pre-order it through Amazon. So I ordered it the moment you sent an invitation, and it arrived about 10 days ago. But I feel called to, I want to read out the dedication that you gifted me with for my students. I asked you when the book was published, and you wrote this in
And didn't you send me a picture of all of them holding up the book?
I believe so, yeah. So you wrote this from Israel on September 27th, 2007. And I just reread it and I thought, you'll know why I want to read this. Dearest divine beings, may you all be blessed with the wisdom of the Yoga Sutras and use this knowledge to transform your lives and those you touch with your open, loving hearts. Enjoy, Nischala Devi. I'm tearing up just reading it.
Very beautiful.
Yeah.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
If we don't remind each other, who's going to remind us? Certainly not somebody out there who's going to think there's a strangeness. They're going to see. We have to keep reminding each other that we are divine beings. Otherwise, we're going to forget. Yeah. We're going to think we're merely human. Merely human. That's what we say. Oh, I'm only human. Yeah, but you're not only human. You're also divine. The two are together. Okay. If there's no. Okay.
Closing chant.
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah. Some of you know this mantra, Loka Samasta Sukhino.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Yeah.
Let's chant that 3 times together.
But on mute.
Yes, but on mute. But still together.
Yeah, still together.
Yeah.
The energy goes out together, but we don't hear the cacophony. Yeah.
We can even feel that we send that energy from the heart outward to all those in need of it. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth dispel all ignorance. Victory to that light. Jai Sri Satguru Maharaj Ki.
Jai. And Maharani Ki too. Yes. Yes.
Jai Sri Nischala Devi Ma Ki.
Thank you all for being here. And if I have inspired you, your job is to go out and inspire at least one other person. And if you do 2, you get more points. So just let them know who they are by your smile, by your way, whatever. Thank you. And let everybody know about the book. That's the other thing. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Right.
Thank you, Ramananda, for arranging all this and bringing all this together to happen. Thank you.
My great pleasure.
Yeah, it was. It was. Okay.
Okay, bye everyone. Thank you, Nischala.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
I see people's hands.
Thank you so much. Bye.